Well, good evening. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining John and I at Arroyo Cellars. We're social distancing, but we're doing a little wine tasting, and we appreciate you guys tuning in and trying some wine with us. How was your day, John?
It was a wonderful day. Spent part of it at work. Part of it I got the chance to swing by Sonol and say hi to some of the people picking up their samples of wine while they were doing a wonderful drive-by at the school. And for those of you who picked up the little boxes, I've got mine on display in front of me right now. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it looks fantastic. And with that, I can't wait to go ahead and get started on this. Our first wine that we're going to be doing is our Chardonnay. It's a 2016 Chardonnay. And let's get started. Yeah. Beautiful color.
Yeah.
Nice and clear.
So one of the things I like about wines is experiencing the bouquet that they have, and just basically I will sit and swirl wine in my glass for a minute or two before I even start to taste it, because I want to experience that initial characteristics or flavors that you get with the wine. And to me, the first experience I want is the smell of the wine, the bouquet. There are some wines where I've literally just sat there for 5 minutes and smelled, because it has such a great bouquet to it. This one has very nice bouquet. You get subtle fruit notes to it. You get a little bit of tropical fruits in there, a little bit of oak. The nice thing I like is that the oak is not dominating the wine, so you really get some nice characters just by smelling it. It kind of entices you and kind of sets your mind to where the wine is going to go once you actually taste it and get it into your mouth.
Yeah, I pick up a little hint of stone fruit in this, which is really, really nice. A little bit of that white peach.
Yeah. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, you don't understand something that we're saying, feel free to type in, log in, and ask questions. We'll do our best to answer them the best we can. John and I are not winemakers by training. We're winemakers by doing, and winemakers by just learning and doing. So we don't necessarily have all the technical that somebody who's working for a larger winery or who's gone through UC Davis or Fresno State has. But we have an appreciation for wine and have learned our skills by doing. So,
yeah, it's a wonderful thing. We've learned a lot by making a lot of mistakes. The good news when you're mixing wines and blending wines and you make a mistake is you get to drink it. The bad news is sometimes you get to drink it. But it is a wonderful learning experience, a teaching experience. And Denise and Drew, hello back.
And one of the things that John and I do is that we'll meet here at the winery, and we both have full-time jobs, so the weekends are the times where we get to do winemaking. And when the tasting room was open, a lot of times we'd be on duty that afternoon. So John and I would have to get here very early in the morning and figure out what the day's tasks were, and most of it involves doing blending, racking, checking wines. We get here anywhere between 6 and 7 in the morning.
Right.
It's kind of a wake-up experience to taste wine that early. Your taste buds really aren't ready for it, but then it gets actually really great, because you're getting to taste things kind of uncensored. You're getting it as it is and how it's supposed to be. and you can generate opinions of what's good and bad and what goes into this lot and what's going to go into the other lot. So it's kind of fun to taste those first thing in the morning before you've had coffee, before you've had breakfast, because your taste buds are kind of fresh.
I haven't tried any of the cheese yet, but I'm thinking that I'm going to try a little bit of cheese to go with the chard, because there's a nice crispness, a little bit of an acid with the chard, and I think the creaminess of the cheese would actually go well with it.
Yeah, cheese is one of those magical pairings that you can do with wines. And the reason being is that the fat in the cheese kind of coats the tongue. So it's always been, oh, cheese and red wine are a great combination. Well, cheese and anything that's got some sharpness or some acidity works well because the fat coats your tongue. So when you taste it, it kind of dumbs down that sharpness, that tannin or that acidity, and so then you're able to really then focus on the flavors of the cheese that you're tasting.
Yeah. It's actually very pleasant, and one of the nice things about it is it helps to accent the fruit a little more too. So you're actually picking up a little more of the citrus.
Right.
Softens the stone fruit a little bit. So I think that's a good mix.
Hey, food and wine is always a good mix.
Oh yeah.
And when we talk about food and wine, everybody has preconceived notions of whites that you have with certain things and reds you have with certain things. Personally, for me, I throw all of that out because there are times where I really want a white. Doesn't matter what I'm having. If it's a hot day, I want a nice, cool Sauvignon Blanc or a Pinot Gris. If it's a cold night, but I'm having seafood or whatever, I may do a red just because I want something that's a little bit richer, a little bit deeper. And you can have a lot of fun with trying things and doing new pairings. So don't get hooked or caught up that you have to have, red with meat and white with fish. Have what you like, drink what you like, and enjoy it.
Yeah, I could actually picture this with a nice pork chop.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit of a sausage. Some, like trumpet mushrooms or maybe shiitake mushrooms that were done in a real light olive oil, not butter. Butter would not, to me, would fight with the wine. But yeah, I could see that working very well.
The wine has enough butter in it.
Mm-hmm. It does.
So this is from, it's our Napa Chardonnay. Probably should have said this a lot earlier. It's from Edict Vineyards. It's from the Carneros region. It's gone through ML, so you're going to get that creaminess or richness on the palate. It kind of knocks down the sharpness that whites can have and gives it that richness and the creaminess. Don't know if this went through total 100% malolactic fermentation or if it just went through partial, but it's got that nice richness, that creaminess. Doesn't have that heavy butteriness that you'll get with full malolactic. So it's just got a nice mouthfeel to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the exciting news is that next month we're actually going to be bottling our 2019 Chardonnay, which we got, that fruit came from the Splendorio vineyard. Mm-hmm. And on that one, it also has gone through the ML. And we've been aging that wine in neutral American oak barrels, Sur-Lie. And why don't you explain the Sur-Lie process?
So, when you ferment a wine and you finish fermenting, you have all those dead yeast cells on the bottom. And it used to be practice that everybody would kind of get rid of that. They'd rack off the clean wine, put it into a barrel and leave it there. Well, what they found out was over courses of hundred of years or more of different styles of winemaking in different regions, that yeast, as the wine sits on that yeast, and as that yeast starts to break down, it adds a richness and creaminess to the wine. The best example is on Method Champenois, where you do a second fermentation in the bottle, and that yeast stays in there until it is disgorged out of the bottle. Well, that yeast, after a period of time, starts to break down and add some richness and creaminess to the wine. So wineries started doing that when they would barrel age their wines, especially Chardonnay. They would leave some of the lees or some of the dead yeast cells in with the wine. And what you do is you put your wine in your barrel. You don't worry about racking it. You don't worry about if it's clean and pretty right off the bat. And then once a week, once a month, depending on what your regimen is, you go through and you stir the barrel to resuspend that yeast which has fallen to the bottom. So doing that all that time really adds some complexity to the wine. You're getting an interaction with the yeast cells, which are decomposing, degrading, and the wine, and it adds a certain mouthfeel and richness to it.
Yeah. So if you've ever picked up like that hint of a fresh bread or a French bread taste in the wine, that's what you're actually picking up on, is the fact that the yeast was left in the barrel and the wine was aged with the yeast.
Yeah, and it to me is it adds phenomenal taste to it. I know when we were tasting the Chardonnay, which will be very different because this is Napa and our new Chardonnay is Livermore. I was curious to take a sample a couple weeks ago, so I did, and because we're going to be getting it ready for bottling. And I walked in and I handed the glass to John and said, "Taste that." And his comment was, "I'm okay with that."
Yeah.
I mean, it had that certain flavor. It had that richness. You could taste the malolactic in there, which is, and for those who don't know, malolactic is a process where you're taking the sharp acid, malic acid, which is very prevalent in like apples, and you're converting it to lactic acid, which is lactic acid is what you have in milk. So you're taking the malic acid, converting it to lactic acid. So you're taking something sharp and converting it to something soft and round in that. So that whole process, along with the aging it on the lees, really adds to the mouthfeel and the pleasure of the wine.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed the Chardonnay, but now I think we're going to move on to the next wine. And for the next wine, we're going to be going to the rosé. The rosé that we have is a 2017 Pinot Noir rosé. The fruit came from the Carneros region. Again, this is a fun wine to do, and you try it different ways. For those of you who have really chilled it, enjoy it now, but don't finish it. Let it sit for a little bit and try and go back to it a little later as it warms up a bit.
Yeah, wine is when it on a hot day. I mean, the last couple days, a very cold white or a rosé is very refreshing, and it kind of takes the edge off of the of the heat that you're experiencing. But cold also dumbs down the wine. It starts to mask the flavors. And my father-in-law, who is winemaker in the Livermore Valley for 50 years, basically always said is, if you go to a tasting room and they're serving a wine that's ice cold, yes, you're going to like it. It's really nice. It's refreshing, whatever. But they're trying to hide something, because when you chill a wine down and you're serving it really cold, you start to mask all the things that may or may not be good about the wine. You're masking the good things, but you're also hiding. You can also hide some of the things that are not good about it. So you don't want to chill wines too much. 55 degrees is probably ideal. Anything Under that, you start to lose the character of the wine. And as John said, is with a rosé, as you have it in your glass and as it starts to warm up, it starts to open up, and all of a sudden you start to get different notes, different flavors, different characteristics that you don't get when it's cold. And to me, that's the fun thing about having wine with dinner. You start it and it does one thing one way, and by the time you're done with dinner, it's completely changed into a different wine.
And I'm enjoying this right now. I'm listening to Tim and I'm learning things, but better than that, while Tim's talking, I get a chance to actually sip the wine, which really works well.
So one thing about the Chardonnay and this Pinot Noir, they come from the Carneros region, which is a sub-appellation of, it's kind of on the Napa-Sonoma border. But one good thing about that is, much like the Livermore Valley, but even a little bit more so, it gets the coastal influence. So Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which are not hot weather grapes by any stretch of the imagination, they really benefit by warm days, cool nights. So to grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in that region is really prime area to do it. You can grow Pinot Noir, you can grow Chardonnay anywhere you want, but the quality of the wines and the quality of the fruit is not going to be as good if you did it, if you grew Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in Bakersfield. It's not going to do well as it would up in Carneros. So it's kind of a nice, it's a great region to get fruit from, especially if you want to accentuate the characteristics of the grapes and the wine that they turn into.
Yeah, it's a wonderful summer wine as well. And again, this is a wine that has enough structure to it that you can have it just to sit and sip, sit and enjoy in the evening, have it with a little bit of fruit, but it's also served at the right temperature. This is a good food wine. So I think it would surprise you a lot. And then, the commercial, again, is the other thing. We're going to be very busy in June this year because we're going to be bottling a small amount of our 2019 Pinot Noir. And that, just a small amount. So some of it we're still going to age longer in barrel, but it is just such a clean, beautiful fruit. And we did a little experiment on the Pinot Noir where one of the bins, we did not run it through the stemmer crusher. So the fermentation process was on whole clusters, and there's a name for that.
Carbonic maceration.
There you go. And the fruit was just absolutely beautiful when it came through. So we're thinking that just a little bit of that is worthy of bottling early and letting people enjoy that. And that fruit we picked up from the Nelaterra vineyards, which is just off of 680, not far from Seattle.
Right. And so I was talking about Pinot Noir being, cool climate, and people think that Livermore is, a desert, and we're Central Valley, and we're not. Pinot Noir is very hard to grow in Livermore just because we don't have right exposures, we don't have the pristine, the perfect climate to it. But there are certain areas in Livermore that you can do it, or in the Livermore Valley. This particular vineyard, it's in Sonoma. It's kind of nestled back in a valley, so it's a little bit more protected. It's a little bit more.
A little more coastal influence.
Yeah, exactly. And so, by that coastal influence, it keeps the grapes cool, so that they can do good things. John made made the call that we were doing Pinot last year, and I was like, okay, I'm all for it, but it's a tough grape to deal with, and I'm actually glad he did, because it was great fruit, great flavor. It's just kind of something that's fun to do. Before we leave this, though, what flavors did you get with there? I'm getting like strawberry, that kind of range of fruits, maybe a slight cherry or berry flavor in there. Not anything heavy. It doesn't dominate the wine.
And I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. There's a Chinese fruit that it's just a lovely little thing, and it looks like a star. I'm getting a hint of that.
Yeah, I know the one you think of, but I can't think of the name of it.
Okay. But now we are going to move on to the next wine, and this is our 2016 Cabernet Sauvignon. The grapes for this wine actually came from right here in Livermore, up, what is it, Crane Ridge, Three Steves Vineyard.
Yeah. And that. When we first did this wine, this was kind of, it almost disappointed me in that it was not the Cabernet that I was expecting to come from Livermore. It was not a Wendy Wetmore cab. It was not, a big, earthy, heavy cab. And so we tasted it, and it's like, it's okay. But two things have come to mind on this wine for me. Number one is that my thoughts and my way of making wine and what I think wine should be are great, but they're not necessarily the direction the wine industry is going. I think we were tasting it one day, or we were at another winery one day, and I was tasting it, or tasting a wine that they had, and kind of the light went on that, wow, this is not what I expected from a cab. And then all of a sudden it went on, that light went on and said, but wait, this is more of a wine for the millennials. This is more of a wine that they will buy because you don't have to age it. You don't have to understand it. It is very pleasant. It's easy drinking. It goes with a variety of foods. You don't have to give a whole lot of thought and have, 30 years of wine drinking behind you to understand it. And that's kind of when the light went on that, hey, we need to look at all the wines we do and not put our spin or our judgment on how they need to be. The one thing that I have found this is 16, right?
This is a 16.
Yeah. So we've done 16, 17, 18, and 19 cabs from Three Steves. And this cab is very consistent. It's never going to be a big, heavy, over-the-top cab. It's not going to benefit by a lot of oak. It's just basically meant to be a pleasant, soft, sipping Cabernet. And once I kind of wrapped my head around that, it's like, this is enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, it's a very approachable cab. It's not one that you have to worry about aging to soften the tannins. It's not one that you absolutely have to have food with. It's one that you can truly just sit, sip, and enjoy. It still has the structure. And the other thing that was a very pleasant surprise with this cab is that time in the bottle actually benefited the cab. It's gotten richer. The flavors have become more rounded as it's aged and matured. So I'm thinking now that this cab is one that's still not quite approached its peak, but it's one that I would say, yeah, enjoy today, enjoy over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. This is not one that you want to lay down. This is not a legacy wine that you're going to leave for your grandchildren. This is meant truly to be something that can be shared with friends or better yet, with yourself, and just have a wonderful time, a wonderful experience. It's a light, approachable wine, a very respectable Cabernet.
Yeah. And like I say, the flavors in this are very consistent year after year after year. It's more of the bright fruit. Tannins are very soft. And in fact, in the harvest of 2019, I actually thought that Three Steves had forgotten that we were supposed to be getting some, because I don't think it was harvested until the second week
Yeah, it's really
um,
late.
in November. And it's like I would text them and say, hey, you know, cab, are we doing cab, whatever, and wouldn't hear back. And then finally they said, no, we're okay. We've got, it's just very slow ripening. It doesn't come in high sugars. It's like 22, 23%
Right.
sugar when it's harvested. So it's not something it's ever going to be a big wine unless we have a really warm summer where sugars spike up. Then we may
Right.
get something. But and it's one of those wines you come to appreciate. You come to say, is, you know what, we don't need something that's big. We don't need something that's over the top. This would probably go really well with salmon. Salmon and some capers and dill, because it's not heavy, it doesn't do it.
Right.
And it's actually been one of our better, to my surprise, one of our better selling
selling.
wines.
Yeah. And I just had one of the blackberries along with the cab. And what that did was it actually accented the fruit flavors in the wine. It made them jump. It was a really pleasant experience.
I'll have to go. I got one. I'll try it.
Yeah, that's worthwhile.
And that's what's so great about wine is that when you have it with food, if you drink the wine by itself, it has a certain characteristics. If you introduce food into it, that food all of a sudden yanks that wine over into a different direction and basically kind of tumbles it around and gives you something that's completely different than when you first tasted it. So
Yeah, every pairing is special. Sometimes, you know, you get a pairing where the wine or the food benefits, and that's a good pairing. Sometimes you get that magic that happens where both the wine and the food are enhanced and blend together, and that's just a wonderful thing. And then sometimes you just go, oh.
wrong choice.
Right.
And that. But you know, it's there is no, wine is not like computer science or engineering or whatever, that you know, you follow a formula, you follow a process, and boom, when you come out you get the same answer, the same results every time. Wine is one of those fluid things, and only somebody, you know, the size of Gallo or the size of some of the largest wineries in California, only they can replicate year after year after year. But they've taken it from not letting the wine speak to itself, but to basically manipulating it so that, you know, you have the same wine, the same taste year after year. They do it because they're sold across the United States, around the world. They have to, because the lady who goes and buys a gallon of Hardy Burgundy off the shelf wants that flavor every single time. We don't care about that. We want the experience. We want the difference. We want to taste the harvest, the season.
We want the wine to speak to us.
Right.
And so while Tim was finishing that up, I went ahead and I pulled out the next wine, which is the Merlot. And it's a beautiful follow-on to the cab that we just had. On this one, you will pick up a little more tannin. You'll pick up a little more of that oak. It still has that beautiful fruit characteristic of the Cabernet, and to some people it actually drinks more like a cab than our cab does.
Right.
But again, it's an approachable wine. It's the tannins on it are still soft and subdued, so it's not a wine that is begging to have food with it. But it's a wine that can stand up to a pretty substantial meal.
Yeah, this cab is from Thatcher Bay, and anybody who has been in the Livermore Valley for any length of time or is familiar with wines from various wineries in Livermore Valley know that there is a lot of Thatcher Bay, both Cab and Merlot, that is used by especially the smaller wineries. This vineyard is out on Greenville, or it backs up to Greenville, kind of in between the lab and Tesla Road. And it's run by Scott Burkhart, and he kind of got into the grape growing business because he was friends with Earl at Cedar Mountain, and he had this property with nothing on it, and I think Earl suggested he plant grapes, which he did, and he jumped into the grape growing with both feet. He is by far one of the most conscientious growers that we have, and I kind of tell the story that you don't tell Scott when you want the grapes picked. He tells you, because he's in that vineyard. He knows that. He knows the upper versus the lower, the left versus the right. He knows when things are ripe, and he, being a labbie or a scientist, kind of pinpoints in. And I'll get during harvest weekly updates of where the sugars are in a graph chart, and saying, okay, it looks like we're 3 weeks out. It looks like we're a week and a half out because we had a cold spell, or the heat spell we just had knocked it back another 2 weeks. So you get this graph and this chart of where the sugars are and how they're progressing. It is really kind of fun to see somebody that conscientious and who knows. My guess would be he probably knows every single vine and probably has a name for every single vine. I don't know that for a fact, but the way he treats his vineyard.
I think Fred's a common name.
Yeah, Fred.
Yeah. And we just got a very interesting question from Megan. She wants to know what goes with yoga pants and popcorn. And the short answer that I'm going to give you right now is unfortunately one that we don't have in front of us, but believe it or not, I would go with the champagne. Champagne goes with almost everything, and it's just a wonderful thing. The other thing that I would consider would maybe be something along the lines of a Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, I could actually see though our Chardonnay. Just light.
Yeah.
If it's
if it's not a heavy buttered popcorn, I'll agree with you.
Yeah. It's actually now, as I was suggesting that, I go back and I smell this, and the nose on this has completely changed. Just sitting here in the 20 minutes we've been doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, Tim was talking before about a consistency of flavor and how when you do these small lots that we do, you tend to be strongly influenced by what nature is doing to you. You don't have the ability to do the different blendings to maintain the consistency. The almost exception to that is the Thatcher Bay Merlot. It is consistent every year, and it's something that you can actually depend on because he knows what he's doing. He picks it at the right time. So it's a fully developed, fully mature grape year after year. That's one of the beauties of this wine.
Yeah. To me, I'm getting like I'm getting both kind of herbal characteristics, but I'm also getting like spice characteristics to it. Mm-hmm. You don't want, in a red, you don't want too much herbal, because that usually means that it's, the grapes were probably a little bit too green, they were underripe, and that. Mm-hmm. But a little bit is okay, because a little bit gives it that green olive, that's, it kind of adds a spice, and especially when you have something that's a little bit more herbal, mm-hmm. or a little bit more spicy and herbal, they kind of complement each other, and they take you down another thing. I'm getting like a little bit of star anise and I don't know, star anise and a little bit of licorice in there.
Yeah.
And
one thing I like is it actually coats the mouth. and
Yeah.
it is leaving a layer of taste on the tongue. And you get, from the tannins, you get a soft layer. It's almost like a very, very light velvet on just hanging on the back of the tongue after you sip the wine and you just let it sit in the mouth for a minute or two. It's a very enjoyable wine.
Actually, and with a piece of the cheese in there,
Yeah.
it starts to, it kind of switches it to the cherry notes and stuff. It just kind of knocks out that herbal that I'm getting and basically changes it to like a cherry note to it.
Okay. And now for you Monty Python fans, we're going to go to something totally different. So we're going to be switching over to the next wine, which is our Dry Creek Zinfandel 2016.
So we have two Zins in your packs. We have Livermore Zin and Dry Creek Zin. A year ago, when all the partners, we sat down and we tasted these wines for the first time as a group and tried to come up with this cute little thing that Marie did for us, the tasting notes and descriptions. We felt the Dry Creek was a great representation of a Zinfandel, a great representation from Sonoma. But compared to the Livermore, it paled in comparison. We just like the richness. We just like the characteristic we got from the Livermore. This, much like our Cabernet, the longer it's been in the bottle, has
it's grown.
developed. And to me, I really started to understand this wine at Christmas time, because when I would take, and I'd be working in the tasting room and I'd be checking bottles, making sure they were okay, I would sit there and smell it. And to me, this was Christmas in a glass. You get so much spice, you get so much cloves, cinnamon, cardamom, all those things that I think of for Christmas. And I'm getting it now in the glass. It's just got that great characteristics, great flavors.
Okay, and I just tried this with one of the pieces of salami, and I have to give a good shout out to Carla at Brie Grazing Boards, because the selection of foods that she's provided to us are just a wonderful array of tastes, textures, and the selection of wines that we have, the range of wines that we have, is taking advantage of the selection that she provided. It's a wonderful thing. So for those of you who did pick up the board, I'm sure you're enjoying it. And for those of you who didn't, be envious of what I have in front of me, but I'm sure you have something just as delightful on your own right now. But it is a great experience. And so, again, thank you, Carla.
Yeah, she did a great job. And thank you for Marie for connecting all of us together. So, one of the things that happened with this wine that was totally unplanned or whatever, but
You mean like most of our stuff?
well, yeah, that's true. We fly by the seat of our pants. But we happened to have a wine writer come in, Michael Kelly, and he came in because his daughter raved about our Chardonnay, and so he came in and wanted to finally taste our wines and that. And he was doing a pairing, or he was assisting Tillamook Cheese in a pairing of wine and cheese. And he tasted this Dry Creek. And as he and I were talking, and as I described it as Christmas in a glass, to him, it's like, I'm talking to him and the light bulb goes on, and I can see the light bulb go on in his head, and it's like, this would be really good with their smoked cheddar. So he was doing a tasting and a comparison, so he took some bottles and he emailed me or texted me a couple weeks later and said well, good news for you, we were right. This does go well with smoked cheddar cheese, especially Tillamook. So for those of you who like smoked cheddar, try this with some Tillamook smoked cheddar because it is a dynamite pairing. It's got all the smokiness of it, and I mean, the smoke and the Christmas spices, in the smoke and the cheddar and the oak and the Christmas spices in this just really pair nicely. So, and to Michael, thank you for recommending us.
Yeah, and it's also a wine that goes really good with a grilled meat, a sausage, something with a little bit of a fattiness in it, because it pairs well both with the spices in the wine as well as with the acid, the Christmas. Yeah. Okay, you got me saying Christmas. I meant to say crispness of the wine. But now we're going to move on to that last wine that we have, and this is the Livermore Valley 2015. The fruit for this wine came from the VBC vineyards. That's our name for it. So if any of you have been driving along on 580 and you know, Costco's off on your left-hand side and you look and you see this vineyard up on the hillside, that's where these grapes came from. So it's the vines behind Costco. Now, this is not a 100% Zin. We actually did blend in 5% Petite Sirah into this wine as well. And that wine came from Dr. Aguirre's property, or not wine, the grapes.
The grapes.
And it just added a little bit to the finish of the wine. What it did was it actually accented the spices on the back end of the wine.
Yeah, when John and I were tasting this, it was nice Zinfandel. It was a, I guess pleasant is probably what we could say about it. But John and I have been doing this together for 20 plus years, so we kind of know what each other thinks. And we basically looked at each other and instinctively says it needs a Petite Sirah.
That is correct.
And that's kind of the fun thing that I get to do with John is that when I was doing wine at LVC, and I'm getting ready, I'm taking the week off or the 2 weeks off before bottling, and I've got everything ready, but I'm trying to figure out final blends. If I could never figure something out, I was on the phone to John saying, hey, on your way home, stop by. I've got 20 samples here. My taste buds are shot. I don't know which way to go. And John would come by and he would systematically kick things out and say, you know, this, and this. And then we do the blends like, okay, good, that works. So John and I have very similar taste, thought process. We don't necessarily go about it the same way, but as a good pairing is we ultimately end up coming back in the middle. And this is, we looked at this, we tried varying percentages, and we did. We basically said it's 5% works on this.
It worked beautifully, yeah. So, yeah, I've been really lucky over the years. I've had an opportunity to, you know, come out to California, meet a lot of great people. Had the opportunity to get together with a family that had a passion for making wine, and they were foolish enough to allow me to play. And we developed a long friendship after that, and I've learned a lot. So Tim has a more of the background knowledge in making wine. I just happen to have been lucky to, you know, have a reasonably good palate and an opportunity to meet up with somebody who helped me to cultivate that. And I think that the partnership is actually, yeah, well, for me anyway, it's been a lot of fun. And I hope that you guys are enjoying the product of the partnership that Tim and I have developed.
Yeah. basically, I mean, it's like anytime you're working with wine, you basically, your palate dies after a while. If you've done any long-term wine tastings, you know, or I mean, it's like if you go up to Napa and you try to do 10 wineries, but by the 6th winery, your palate's dead because you just can't take in that much wine. You have to start learning stuff, and your palate starts learning stuff. John's palate has learned it in spades. I mean, he knows how to do it, and you have to think outside the box.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the great thing about John and I. We kind of look at each other, and our minds are going 100 miles an hour of like, okay, which barrel do we do? What do we remember that tasted that may complement this? And sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong.
And like I said, you get to drink our mistakes.
Yeah. And we've had at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it makes for an interesting day.
That it does.
Okay.
But you know, to me, is this wine has a lot of a lot of meaning to me, because this is kind of it's our first Livermore Valley vintage. I mean, we have Napa, we have and we have other things, but this is a 15. So it's our first, you know, Livermore Valley, and there's something about it. We have connections to that vineyard. We have relationships with wineries who helped us secure these grapes and to be able to do this stuff. So I mean, this kind of to me was kind of our flagship of like, you know what, if this is what we're going out the door with, or opening the doors with, I'm okay with it.
This is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that, I want to just thank everybody that joined us this evening. I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me. To me, it was great. I had a chance to drink 6 different wines and eat some fantastic food and ramble on aimlessly. So, you know.
And I would actually like to thank Marie for putting this together. She was the marketing guru behind this, and she made sure that everybody got their samples. I would like to thank my son Brendan for being our videographer and figuring out how to do all this stuff, and I'd like to thank Giraffe Space for helping out with equipment and what we needed to do it. I want to also thank Carla at the Bree Grazing Board. Sorry, my memory shot at this point in time. For her for providing us with the grazing boards, and for everything that for those of you who bought the grazing boards were able to enjoy, and I also want to thank all of you for sitting down with us and having a good time, and
sharing part of your lives with us.
Yeah, and this is our first one. We don't know how many more we were going to do. We don't know where we're going from here. But we do want to say that once we get back open, we hope you'll come visit us. John and I are both excited about everything that we've got coming up in the winery and the new wines we're going to be released. So we hope you'll